problem with the school districts, they see you as one certain way, or they want to clump, behavioral problems, and then all of a sudden now you're in special ed. Because half the people in special ed should not have been in special ed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, like I said, they're probably smarter than me.
I always knew I was smart. My family always told me I was smart, and my mother used to read to me at a young age, so I always knew how to read before most of my classmates.
But we see every behavioral problem, we want to deal with it, so in special ed you go.
Mm-hmm.
That happens all the time.
Yeah.
That happens all the time.
Friends that I had, you know, one of the hang with my black friends, the group, you know, a few of them had been through the special ed, and I see a couple of them now, and I'm not going to blame their problems today on their special ed class, but their special ed class didn't help them any at all. I mean, what was the special education? Breaking and entering?
In 2nd grade at Penn Wynn, I'll never forget this. I used to pick my son up to take him to karate. And this one particular day, he had this big roll of candy. And I said, well, where'd you get that candy? He was somewhat hyperactive, so candy wasn't something that I promoted. And he said, well, my special teacher gave it to me. What special teacher? So as he proceeded to answer my questions, I figured out that he'd been put in some special remedial class without my knowledge or consent. And I remember papers having come home about some Title I program. And because I didn't completely understand it, I had called, but I hadn't got clarification, so I had not signed off the paperwork. I spoke with his teacher, and she couldn't really provide me with the proper clarification. So I said, well, I need to speak with the principal. And as I explained my concern, the principal said, well, oh, Miss Bryant, you know, don't worry about it. We won't send him anymore if you don't agree with that. And I said, no, I need you to send him because I need to come over and observe and see exactly what's going on in this special class. It was my son and 6 other African American boys, and I could not understand how do you come up with a class of this many African American boys when there are only a handful here. How did that happen?
When you put kids in special classes, that you cut them in the core of their being, and you they cut them in their creativity, and I see it all the time.
The kids are in there, they're lifelong special ed learners, and they enable and they become so dependent that they don't know how to navigate and think for themselves. Instead of them having choices to go to colleges, they have to sit back and wait and see who's going to accept them, because yet again, they don't have the skills. They cannot compete with the rest of their peers.
They use the special education program to push students through, to say that, oh, well, he's a little hyper, he's not smart enough, so we'll just push him through. It wasn't until the middle of my high school career that I actually came out of the special education program, and I started taking the classes like calculus and Japanese, and really showing my teachers that I could do it if I applied myself. But it took for me to believe in myself and for my family and for faith in God for me to really make it through that school system.
Once we realize that we're keeping low-income and minority kids out of rigorous courses, there can only be 2 arguments for keeping it that way. Either we think they can't learn, or we think they're not worth teaching. The first argument would be factually wrong, and the second would be morally wrong.
The black kids were not expected to achieve, and they were encouraged not to by telling them that they were not going to be college entries. A lot of the kids were just pushed through because they were large and needed to be moved along, and they just were moved along. We had kids that could hardly read that were moved on through the system.
It wasn't until I got to senior high, when I was trying to get into college prep courses, that I was told I was not that type of college material, and that I had to be in a general course. And general means just that. You just take anything and everything just so you could accumulate enough credits to graduate.
When it came time to choose classes in senior high school, we were never encouraged to do anything besides a general class.
The teachers weren't challenging us. See, if we wanted to get into a college preparatory course, man, it was a whole lot like Who Struck John?
The majority of the black students at that time, I'm sure most of them failed a grade. I failed 7. They had sections, and most of the lower sections, that's where all the black children were. Back then, I guess, that's been a long time ago, maybe you kind of figured that's the way it was supposed to be, because everybody was kind of grouped in the same way, you know, and I think you got kind of comfortable because you basically knew everybody. They were from the area or Bryn Mawr, you know, so it was kind of like a comfortable feeling. It wasn't until you get older and in life you realize, well, hey, you know, like I was grouped, didn't have a chance to really find out what your real potential was.
When I graduated from high school, I remember the girls in Ardmore Avenue School, there were 5 of us, and I think only 2 of us graduated. I wasn't really passed through because I managed to get promoted every year, and I had to do what I had to do to get promoted, but I wasn't challenged at all. When I first went to nursing school, and because of my grades, they weren't going to accept me, but I had to take an IQ test. And after I took the IQ test, the principal of the nursing school asked me what happened to me in school, because for my IQ, I should have been in the top 10th of the class.
I never did get the feeling that there was that anybody, any of the teachers, and the teachers liked me. It wasn't because they didn't like me, it was just because they didn't care. And no one ever, you know, said to me, you know, you need to take college preparatory courses. I was more discouraged than encouraged.
I felt 95% of the teachers had 0 expectations, and specifically because of the color of my skin. But I just felt that we were treated differently because we were in fact different, and we weren't the whole's equal to the sum of its parts, and our part was never identified, never considered.
They couldn't put me in special ed because my scores were too high. But what they did do was come against my creativity. A child does not understand how to separate the creativity from themselves because the creativity is part of them. So when you come against their gift, you come against the child. And a child does not know how to deal with that. And I didn't know how to deal with that. And a result of those pieces, I've been drawn for years.
There were some teachers who challenged me. One person I remember was Mr. Henney, Robert Henney. And what I liked about Mr. Henney, he was a history teacher. He taught alternatives. Okay, so he didn't open the book and say, oh, well, because you're a black, you were a slave, and that was it. He gave us a chance to do our own research and to look at, and for us to look at those things that were relevant to us as people of color. And I always respected him for that, because what was written in the books, we found out a lot of it were half-truths and total lies in regards to us as a race of people. So it's kind of tough when you're given a book that you know wasn't written with you in mind. And if anything, it was written to portray you as something altogether different, in a sense, as a monster or someone that was less than a human being.